It was a hot July afternoon in Seattle, the heat seeping through every crack and crevice in the house, making the air thick and suffocating. In the distance, fireworks had begun to crackle, signaling the approach of 4th of July. Emma Larson, 32, was busy in the kitchen of the house that I had devoted all my efforts to maintaining. The smell of grilled meat and spices wafted through the air, trying to suppress the feeling of claustrophobia that was gradually enveloping me. My face was covered in smoke. My brown hair tied up in a ponytail was now loose in a few strands. The white shirt I had worn since early morning was stained with grease. Through the window, I saw my mother, Eleanor, in a colorful dress and a sparkling necklace, chatting animatedly with the neighbors. She looked relaxed and at ease, the complete opposite of my exhausted appearance. My younger brother, Ryan, 30, was slumped in an armchair, his eyes glued to the screen of his phone, occasionally bursting into meaningless laughter. He looked like a teenager who had not grown up yet, even though he was at the age when people should have settled down in their careers. Chloe, my youngest sister, 26, was like a living wax figure, constantly posing for the camera, her curly blonde hair shiny and her makeup elaborate. She laughed and talked loudly, her high-pitched voice loud enough to fill the garden. Tom, Mom's husband, an old man, just sat quietly in a corner, eyes glued to the TV screen, looking like a soulless stranger in his own house. I spent the entire morning preparing for today's party. From running to the supermarket to buy all the expensive seafood that Ryan loves, to marinating the meat, roasting the vegetables, and making the signature salad that my mother loves. Everything was prepared meticulously and neatly, just like how I have worked hard to keep this family from collapsing for the past 8 years. For 8 years, I have been the financial pillar, the silent shadow, the bank that they took for granted. I have turned down countless dates, missed out on many opportunities for advancement, and accepted a life of bitter minimalism, just to make sure that they would not have to worry about money. I used to be proud of my sacrifice, believing that family was the most precious thing, and that one day I would receive what I deserved. The party was noisy, filled with laughter and the sound of clinking glasses. I walked around like a waiter, always making sure everyone had enough food and water. Emma, get Mom some more water. Emma, give me another rib. Emma, get me some cake. The calls and orders kept coming. I only responded with a forced smile, even though I was exhausted inside. Whenever someone asked about my work or private life, I avoided the question, because I knew that I had nothing significant other than the empty numbers in my account that they had contributed to spending. As dusk fell, fireworks began to light up the night sky. Everyone was full, their faces flushed with alcohol and excitement. I quietly cleared away the dirty dishes when Chloe stood up, a glass of wine in her hand, her lips painted red under the lantern light. She smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling as if she was about to share some great news. Hey everyone! We have a very important announcement. I paused, my heart pounding, a faint hope rising in my heart. A thank you, maybe? Or at least some recognition for what I had done? Chloe glanced around the table, then stopped at me, her gaze full of mockery. She smirked. After a very thorough family meeting, her tone was drawn out dramatically. We have come to a final decision. Emma is no longer a member of this family. Laughter erupted all at once. Not a friendly laugh, but a sarcastic, malicious sound. A chill ran down my spine. Ryan, still sitting next to me, clapped his hands, echoing with a contemptuous smile. Exactly. Because she stopped sponsoring the whole family. How can we tolerate such a stingy person? My heart clenched. The glass of water in my hand fell from my trembling fingers, shattering on the tile floor. The sound of it shattering echoed coldly in the air filled with laughter. I stared at them, trying to understand what had just happened. My eyes stopped on my mother, Eleanor, waiting for a reaction, a defense, a bit of conscience. But she just sat there, smiling faintly as if it had nothing to do with her. Her eyes cold as steel. Shock and pain. That's all I felt. It was as if 100 knives were stabbing me in the chest at the same time. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I wouldn't let them. Not here. Not in front of the people who had so brazenly trampled on all my sacrifices over the years. The coldness of betrayal seeped into every cell of my skin. more painful than the pain from the broken glass under my feet. Standing still amidst the mocking laughter of those I once called family, my mind was pulled back to the past, to the distant time when this house was a real home, before it all began to fall apart. I grew up in a small suburban house with red brick walls and a lush garden, where weekend barbecues were always filled with laughter. The smell of freshly cut grass, the aroma of meat searing on a charcoal grill, and the joyful screams of children playing. These are my earliest memories of happiness. My father, a quiet but dedicated software engineer, spent every weekend afternoon playing ball with us or telling fairy tales filled with stars. He was the one who took me to the library for the first time, who taught me to look up at the sky and never stop asking questions. My mother, Eleanor, who worked in a bank at the time, kept the house tidy, cozy, and filled with laughter. She had a knack for making every mealtime a special occasion, making every small moment memorable. My older brother, Ryan, was 2 years older than me, and he was a lively but lazy boy, always giving orders rather than taking action. He was always full of big ideas, but never followed through. My younger sister, Chloe, was 6 years younger than me, a little angel with golden hair and expressive eyes. From an early age, she learned to use cuteness and tears as tools to get what she wanted. Despite our different personalities, we were a family, an inseparable unity, with picnics by the lake, summer vacations by the beach, and warm Christmas Eves by the fire. Things began to fall apart when I turned 15. It was a dreary Friday afternoon, with Seattle rain pouring down, turning the sky gray. As I walked into the house after school, I heard a violent argument coming from the living room. Not the usual petty squabbles, but harsh words, sobbing, and the sound of broken furniture. My mother had discovered my father was having an affair with a younger coworker. My childhood world had been torn apart in an instant. The divorce that followed was a long series of bitter conflicts. What was broken was not only the dishes, but also the young hearts that had never learned to face betrayal. Dad left, taking most of the family's income, and gradually disappeared from our lives. Occasionally, he sent a few small allowances, not enough to maintain a minimum standard of living. The house that was once full of light and laughter suddenly became cold and gloomy to the point of suffocation. My mother collapsed completely. She gave up her job, gave up herself, letting sadness gnaw at her every day. The bank door closed, and she became a woman lost in thought, withdrawn and bitter. In the midst of the chaos, Ryan, then 17, did not become a pillar of support for his mother. Instead, he began to indulge in useless fun, hang out with bad friends, and only indulge in unrealistic dreams. He constantly made up unrealistic technology projects to extort money, million-dollar dreams that never came to fruition. Chloe, only 11, became increasingly skillful in controlling her mother's emotions. She knew exactly when to cry, how to coax to get a new toy, an expensive dress, or unconditional pampering. As for me, a child who had just turned 15, I reluctantly became an adult. Seeing my mother exhausted, my brother slipping away, and my sister becoming more and more selfish, I felt as if the whole world was on my shoulders. I started working part-time, serving at a coffee shop after school, tutoring at night, anything that could earn money. I saved every penny, then quietly transferred it to my mother. I did not give myself the right to rest or complain. I simply tried my best to save this family from falling apart. It was the first time in my life that I shouldered a responsibility beyond my age, a naive belief that if I sacrificed enough, tried hard enough, everything could go back to the way it was. But I did not know that. That was just the starting point of a long journey. A journey where I would have to pay a heavy price for my own blind belief that family is everything. The pain of my parents' divorce did not break me. On the contrary, it became the fuel that drove me forward. I promised myself that I would never let myself fall into the same desperate situation as my mother. I had to be strong, independent, and in control of my life. From then on, I threw myself into studying like a person thirsting for liberation, considering knowledge as the only life buoy in the chaotic sea of life. My relentless efforts finally paid off. I won a full scholarship to the University of Washington, majoring in finance. A choice not only because of passion, but also because of the belief that understanding money is the best way to protect yourself from injustice. My college years were not filled with boisterous parties or spontaneous trips like my peers. Instead, I immersed myself in books and worked hard to make a living. I did whatever jobs I could: bartending in a coffee shop, teaching assistant for a professor, selling on weekends at a small shop. Every penny I earned, I cherished and saved, regularly sending it back to my family. I knew my mother and siblings were still struggling every day. My mother, Eleanor, was married to Tom, a gentle and quiet man, but life did not improve much. Tom worked as a salesman with a modest salary, was always silent about everything, and was often ordered around by my mother as an unpaid servant. His presence in the house did not provide any support, just another person dependent on my mother's already fragile finances. When I graduated with honors and landed a stable job in finance, I thought I could start living for myself. But it turned out to be a gateway to a new burden. A burden that was bigger, more insidious, and much harder to shake off. Waves of requests for financial support from family began to come in, steady and unending. Chloe started the conversation. My little sister was always having unexpected problems with her old car. "Emma, my car is dead again. I can't get to work without it fixed." Her voice was choked up, always with a fake sob that I had heard hundreds of times. I knew it was a trite thing, but it still softened my heart. I consoled myself that my sister was young and unstable and needed help, and so every month I sent money. Sometimes for a new tire, sometimes for a new battery, sometimes for an unnecessary upgrade. Then came Ryan. My brother always came up with a billion-dollar idea called a breakthrough technology project. "Emma, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This project will change the fate of the whole family. I only need a small amount of initial capital, and you will receive a tenfold return." His voice was always full of confidence, painting a picture so bright it was hard to believe. And I, in my naivety and my desire to see my brother succeed, believed it. I sent him thousands of dollars for things like software licensing fees and market research. After each transfer, I told myself, this will be the last time. And of course, my mother, Eleanor, was indispensable. She would call often, her voice weary, complaining about the rising cost of living, unpaid bills, or vague emergencies. "My dear, I am old. I am no longer healthy enough to work like before. You are my last hope, the pillar of our family." Those words were like invisible strings, tightening my responsibility. Whenever I hesitated, she would mention the sacrifices of the past, the years of hard work to raise me and educate me. I felt guilty, and that feeling made it impossible for me to refuse. And I didn't say no to anyone. I took on extra work at the company, took on extra projects, and cut all personal expenses to a minimum. No shopping, no going out, no traveling, no new clothes, just work and obligations. I believed that this was an expression of love, that if I was good enough, hardworking enough, I could keep this family together. But I didn't realize that I was creating a perfect system of exploitation where I was the sole provider, and they were the beneficiaries with no intention of ever repaying me. I thought I was patching up the broken home, but in reality, I was just falling into a bottomless pit, where the more I poured in, the more empty I felt. At 24, I was a financial analyst earning $80,000 a year. For many, it was a dream come true, a promising start to a life of luxury in the heart of expensive Seattle. My friends were buying houses, traveling, and spending weekend nights at fancy restaurants. But me? I lived in a small apartment with old furniture, and my dinners were usually instant noodles or rice with eggs. I didn't buy new clothes, I didn't go to the movies, and the only thing I understood as traveling was going back home on weekends to solve my family's financial crises. My family, especially Eleanor, Ryan, and Chloe, seemed to have an uncanny radar for any financial growth. The requests kept coming, increasingly frequent and blatant. Eleanor still called to complain about the cost of living, but now she listed new needs like a high-end massage chair for her back pain, or a large sum of money to refresh the garden to make it less boring. Her tone was light and matter-of-fact, as if it were a given. "Honey, I'm bored living alone. These things will make me happier." And she had almost forgotten that Tom was still working. A modest salary, but enough to cover the basics. Ryan was like an endless assembly line of failed startup ideas. From a pet scheduling app to a yoga book cafe, each project cost me thousands of dollars, but never once did it generate a single cent of profit. He always had a smooth explanation when things failed, followed by a new, bigger idea that needed further investment. Once, he even convinced me to take out a bank loan to invest in a venture capital fund he had set up, promising to double the money in a few months. I refused, but his reproachful eyes and the words, "Don't you trust me?" still haunt me. Chloe, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of extravagant desires. From upgrading her old car to a shiny sedan to expensive beauty courses, weekly spa treatments, and reward trips after stressful work periods, I had no idea what she did. On social media, she regularly posted pictures of her dream life. Fancy meals, cocktails on the beach, designer dresses, all of it, I had quietly paid for. Watching her smile brightly into the Hawaiian sunset, I felt a pang in my heart. Not out of jealousy, but because I realized I was working so hard to fund a life I could never even dream of. The climax came one cold, rainy afternoon. Eleanor's mother called me, her voice trembling with fear. "Emma, honey, home. I'm losing my home." She sobbed about the $18,000 mortgage that was past due and the bank threatening to foreclose. "I don't know what to do. This is all I have. You're my only hope." My heart sank. That house, now a mere shadow of a home, was still the place where my childhood had been preserved. I couldn't let it disappear. Without hesitation, I transferred all my savings, $18,000, from my early working days with the hope of buying a car or putting down a deposit on my first apartment. I texted my mother, "Don't worry, I just sent it." A few weeks later, while surfing the web, I came across a photo that made my blood run cold. A family friend posted a photo of my house. In it, my mother was sitting comfortably on a brand new leather sofa next to a giant flat-screen TV. The living room looked completely different, filled with new furniture, lavish decor. And just a few days later, I saw Chloe posting a photo of herself in Hawaii, wearing a sparkling bikini, smiling broadly with a cocktail in her hand. The feeling of betrayal was like a bucket of cold water poured straight into my face. The entire $18,000, the money I had cherished like my financial lifeline, was not used to save the house, but to buy luxury goods and finance a vacation. I felt cheated, blatantly exploited. I had sacrificed everything for them, and they took that sacrifice for granted, even considered it a privilege. A question stuck in my mind. Did they ever really love me? Or was I just a talking ATM? Even though my anger and hurt were at their peak when my mother called again, her voice sad about another expense, I still sent the money. Like a machine, like a reflex that had become ingrained in my blood. I still clung to a fragile hope that they would change. But I didn't know that this very hope was sinking me deeper and deeper into the black hole of exploitation. The feeling of being taken advantage of and the anger that surged after the new TV and the Hawaiian vacation wasn't just a whim. It was a deep, insidious wound that slowly ate away at my psyche. A slow, unrelenting mental wound. I knew I needed a way to deal with the hurt. Something tangible to record and remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that the pain was real. One afternoon, wandering through a stationery store with a blank mind, my eyes fell on a green storage box. It wasn't anything special, just a sturdy, plain plastic box. But in that moment, it felt like a signal. An idea flashed through my mind, like a subconscious reminder. Hold on to your truth. I bought the box and took it home to my small, cramped apartment. I placed it on my desk, facing the window, where the afternoon light often filtered in, soft and soothing as a consolation. From that day on, every time I sent money to my family, I wrote it down meticulously in a small notebook. The date, the amount, the recipient, the reason they gave, even though I knew it was just an excuse. I carefully printed out bank statements, saved the receipts, and put everything in that blue box. At first, it was just a way for me to comfort myself, a physical proof of my sacrifice. Whenever I felt weak, I opened the box, flipped through the pages, and told myself that I had done everything I could. But then one Saturday evening, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, I decided to add up all my expenses over the years. I sat in front of the blue box, the desk lamp reflecting off the old papers. I pulled out my calculator and added up each line, each item. $100 for car repairs, $500 for utility bills, $2,000 for Ryan's investment. There were $300 for mom's shopping. The numbers kept coming, slowly but ruthlessly. When I entered the final number, my hand froze. The screen showed a huge number, $110,000. $110,000. The number choked me. It wasn't just money. It was years of youth, dreams deferred, the tiny house I never bought, the student loans still hanging in the balance, and the independent future I'd always dreamed of. And now it was all gone, blended into the pleas, ready tears, and endless demands of those I called family. Then the blue box was no longer a place to hold sacrifices, but living evidence of a girl's gullibility, of a girl who had let herself be drained bit by bit. A wave of self-pity, resentment, and disappointment rose like a tidal wave. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I needed to speak up. I needed to set a boundary once and for all. I decided to take the family out to dinner, a mid-range restaurant, cozy enough but not too fancy. I chose a crowded place, hoping the public atmosphere would help temper the reaction. Mother Eleanor, Ryan, Chloe, and Tom were all there. The meal was initially lighthearted, with small talk and casual laughter. I tried to enjoy the rare moment, a moment when I didn't have to check my bank account balance after every sentence. As dessert arrived, a steaming serving of chocolate cake that I knew Chloe loved, I took a deep breath. "Everyone," I began, my voice shaking, "I have something to tell you." Curious eyes immediately turned to me. I swallowed, trying to keep my composure. "I know you're all going through hard times, and I've always tried to help as much as I can. But I have my own life. I need to save for the future, for a house, for old age. The financial burden is getting heavier, and I can't go on like this." I glanced at each of them, hoping to find a glimmer of sympathy. "I hope you understand, and try to be a little more independent." The silence lasted a few seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. My mother's face suddenly darkened. The smile vanished as if it had never existed. "What are you talking about, Emma? Are you abandoning your family? I've sacrificed my whole life for you." Her voice was shrill, echoing around the room. A few guests at the next table turned to look, curious. Ryan laughed sarcastically. "Come on, Emma. You're making money like water. Such a small amount of money, and you act like the sky is falling. Are you calculating with your own family? You're so selfish," he sneered, his eyes sharp as knives. Chloe, as if prepared, started sobbing. "Emma, you want me and Ryan out on the streets? You're the only one we can rely on. Why did you abandon us?" Tears rolled down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking like a well-rehearsed act. Tom remained silent as ever. He bowed his head, avoiding my gaze, as if his very presence at this gathering were an inconvenience. I was backed into a corner. The words, the looks, the accusations were like shapeless knives cutting into my heart. I tried to hold on, but the accusations, the tears, the disappointed looks were too heavy. And I softened again. "No, it's not like that. I'm sorry. I'll try harder." Immediately, my mother smiled back as if she had never been angry. Ryan shrugged nonchalantly, and Chloe wiped her tears, breathing a sigh of relief as if she had overcome a crisis. Dinner continued, laughter returning as if nothing had happened. But for me, something was broken. The blue box was no longer a memorial of sacrifice. It was a symbol of helplessness, of the times I tried to rise up but was pulled back down. I tried to set boundaries but failed miserably. I knew this had to end. But how to get out? I still had no answer. After my bitter failure to set boundaries, I fell into the familiar cycle of giving without stopping. I continued to provide, even though each time I sent money, my heart ached. The disappointment and hurt grew, like a wound that refused to heal. I consoled myself with the faintest hope. that things would be different, that they would understand, change. But deep down, I knew that would never happen. One warm Saturday afternoon, I reluctantly went to my mother's barbecue. I was late, having just finished work. As I stepped into the backyard, something stopped me. The laughter and chatter had died down. The air seemed to hang limply, as if a string was about to snap. Looking toward the far end of the yard, I saw the family gathered around the barbecue area, laughing and talking, oblivious to my presence. Clearly, I had missed the beginning of a conversation, but that was not as important as the words I was about to hear. Ryan's voice rang out clearly, full of sarcasm. "Look at Emma. She's come to preach about how to spend money again? Our free bank." He laughed heartily, and I was stunned to see Eleanor and Chloe's mother laughing along, as if it was the best joke of the evening. The words hit me like a slap. Free banking. Chloe, not missing the opportunity, added another sarcastic remark, her mouth curling up. "Exactly. Let her act like a dog or a buffalo, and we can live our lives to the fullest. Who asked her to be stupid?" She giggled. That fake innocent laugh that I used to think was cute now turned sour to the point of disgust. Then Eleanor's mother's voice rang out. Cold, hard, without a trace of maternal love. "Emma has always lived a boring life. What's the point of saving when there's nothing to enjoy? After all, she's just our family's money-printing machine." She spoke as if she were commenting on an inanimate piece of furniture, not her own daughter. Tom, the gentle, almost invisible man, her new husband, laughed along, though he had no idea what was going on. He was simply going along with the crowd. I stood frozen in the middle of the yard, a lonely stone statue amidst the mocking laughter. Every word, every look, was like sharp thorns piercing my heart. Free banking. Stupid. Money printing machine. That was what they really thought of me. The person who had sacrificed her youth, her own dreams, and her entire financial stability for them. Not a word of thanks. Not a shred of respect. In their eyes, I was not a child, a sister, a relative, but just an emotionless machine born only to serve and be drained. The feeling of betrayal was like a tsunami that swept away everything. Love, forgiveness, even the fragile hope that remained. I felt the blood rush to my face, my eyes burning, but this time, not from weakness. Tears welled up, but not from self-pity, but from anger that was reaching its peak. 8 years. 8 years of being used, of being ignored, of being invisible. It all accumulated and exploded. Enough! I heard the voice in my mind. Not a whisper, but a firm statement. Enough. I will not let them walk all over me another second. In that moment, I felt an awakening. It was not just about stopping the financial support. I was going to make them pay for everything they had done. A plan began to form in my mind. Sharp, cold, but necessary. The upcoming 4th of July party, the day the family always gathered, would be the moment to end it all. The day I would reclaim my independence in a way they would never forget. The fire of anger and determination was no longer just a flash of emotion. It had become a compass that illuminated the path I needed to take. I was no longer the weak, submissive Emma who carried everything in silence. I was a financial expert, someone who analyzed, evaluated, and made tough decisions. And because I knew my own strengths and my own limits, I knew I needed professional help to escape the web my family had spun for years. The first person I went to was a therapist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, an elderly woman with soft eyes and a voice as soft as a spring breeze, greeted me with a quiet tolerance. I told her everything. My deprived childhood, my parents' cold divorce, the financial burden I had to bear, the endless demands, and the painful moment when I heard my own family mock me as a joke. She listened without interrupting, without jumping to conclusions. When I finished, she looked at me for a long time, then spoke softly but clearly like a morning bell. "Emma," she said, "you are a victim of abuse, financial and emotional." The word abuse cut through my mind like a sharp knife. I had never thought of it that way. For years, I had believed myself to be strong, self-sacrificing, but now I realized I had been manipulated, exploited in an unhealthy relationship disguised as love. Dr. Reed helped me see the true nature of their love for me. Not genuine attachment, but control and possession. She taught me how to recognize emotional attacks, and most importantly, how to stand up to them without feeling guilty. Next, I went to attorney Sarah Chen, a smart, sharp woman with the calm demeanor of someone who has fought for justice for decades. I brought her the little blue box where I had carefully kept my spending notes, transfers, and notes that I had once thought were trivial. After reading through them, she nodded slowly. Emma, this is a great start. These notes will help us build a case of breach of trust and possibly pursue legal restitution. She explained my rights in detail, from the ability to set up a legal repayment agreement to the possibility of taking the case to court if they tried to avoid responsibility. With each word, I felt a small spark of hope in the depths of my heart. A way out was beginning to open. But both the therapist and the lawyer insisted. I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something incontrovertible. The truth had to be laid bare so clearly that no one could deny it with emotion or elaborate excuses. So I decided to hire a private investigator. It was a big investment, but I knew it was worth it. The man was quiet, seemingly ordinary enough to blend into a crowd, but his eyes had the sharpness of someone who had seen too many lies. I gave him all the information I had. Addresses, social media accounts, phone numbers for Eleanor's mother, Ryan, and Chloe. I also shared details of the transfers and the reasons they had given. The following weeks were a struggle. I lived in a state of suspense, of hope and fear. Until one morning, I received a package from the detective. My heart pounded as I opened the envelope. Inside was a thick file. Investigative reports, receipts, photographs, bank statements, and other unexpected details. The truth was revealed more clearly than anything I could have imagined. Eleanor's mother. The money I sent home to help her pay her bills was actually spent on luxuries I never dreamed of. Designer clothes, expensive handbags, luxury spa treatments, tennis and golf clubs. The detective even discovered a secret savings account in my mother's name, where she secretly accumulated the money I had sacrificed my entire frugal life to send home. She was never broke. She was just acting. Ryan. The potential tech projects were just a cover for a wild lifestyle. He used my money to buy expensive used sports cars and party at clubs all night long. The worst part was his gambling, casino receipts, pictures of him throwing money at the poker table. All were clearly recorded. Chloe. My sweet sister-in-law, who often calls me good sister, used her car repair money to attend meditation and yoga classes at luxury resorts. She shopped nonstop and checked in at all kinds of international tourist destinations, places I never dared to dream of going to because I was busy paying off their debts. Holding each document in my hands, I no longer felt empty or abandoned. I felt stronger than ever. Each number, each photo was a hammer blow breaking the veil of lies, a testimony to betrayed trust and unsung sacrifices. For the first time in many years, my anger was no longer blind emotion. It was awareness. It was will. It was justice. And now, I am ready to fight. Not just to get back the money that was stolen from me, but to win back my honor, my dignity, and the right to live the life I deserve. The upcoming Independence Day will no longer be just a national day of celebration. It will be the day I free myself from the shackles of a toxic family. The day I declare my independence, not with fireworks, but with the truth. With the undeniable evidence in my hands and the support of experts, I felt a surge of power. No longer a small flame, but a storm waiting to break out. The soft, easily manipulated Emma of the past was gone. Now I was a warrior, tough and alert, ready to enter the final battle to reclaim myself. I knew there was no turning back. Independence Day was approaching, and I decided that this would be the day I declared my personal independence, no longer bound by emotional debt and family exploitation. For several nights in a row, I sat in my blue box, the place where I hid my pain, now a strategic arsenal. No longer a messy arrangement of shame and grief. Each document inside was now a piece of shrapnel that I sharpened. Receipts from my mother's lavish shopping sprees, statements from her secret savings account, photos of Ryan at the poker table and his flashy sports car, receipts from Chloe's high-end yoga classes and plane tickets to Hawaii, all cataloged, stamped, numbered, and arranged by date. Finally, I printed out a summary: $110,000 over 5 years, detailed dollar by dollar, a clear demonstration of a sacrifice exploited to the core. Then I wrote handwritten letters to each of my family members: Eleanor, Ryan, Chloe, and Tom. There were no preambles, no extraneous emotions. These weren't breakup letters, nor were they pleas for forgiveness. They were indictments, ultimatums. I simply listed the facts: the money I'd sent, the things they'd said, and how they'd betrayed my trust. To Mom: you say you need money to survive, but the evidence shows that you spend it on luxury goods and hoard it. You're not struggling. You're just pretending, and you've taken advantage of my trust. To Ryan: you say you're starting a tech business, but you're actually spending my money on cars, gambling, partying. You're not investing, you're a fraud. To Chloe: you mentioned car repairs and living expenses, but I use the money for luxury living, yoga classes at resorts, and international travel. I don't need help. I need funding. To Tom: whether you know it or not, your silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. In each letter, I laid out two clear options. Either they repay the full amount with reasonable interest and agree to family therapy, or I would take the case to court, revealing all the evidence, leaving nothing behind. I no longer feared the breakup. I embraced it as a release. And then I prepared the last gifts, not to appease or rekindle the relationship, but as symbols of closure, as a final farewell to a rotten chapter of life. For Ryan, a new high-end leather wallet, a symbol of maturity and financial responsibility that he never quite achieved. A reminder that money is not a toy. For Chloe, a sparkling silver necklace, symbolizing vanity and the pursuit of appearances. Each glimmer of silver is a reminder of the falsehood she worships. For Eleanor and Tom's mother, a luxury spa voucher, an ironic tribute to the hedonistic lifestyle I had unconsciously cultivated. It was a farewell to the indifference and selfishness that came under the guise of family. I wrapped each gift, placing it in a neutral-colored cloth bag, as if packing away the past for one last time. I would bring them to the party, not to share in the joy, but to witness the collapse of a play in which I had been an unwilling actor. I chose Independence Day for obvious reasons. My family always gathers there, but this year, Emma Larson will not come as a silent sponsor. I will come as a free person, freed from the emotional shackles that have held me back for so many years. The national holiday will be a day of rebirth, of rising from the wreckage my loved ones have created. I practiced the confrontation like I was preparing for a trial. I imagined the tears, the accusations, the tearful justifications, and I practiced my words in front of the mirror, every sentence, every look, so that my voice would not waver. I wrote the script, anticipated every scenario, prepared for both the storm and the cold silence. I no longer feared the breakup. I expected it. Because after the storm, there would be light, and when the dust settled, I, Emma Larson, would no longer be a victim. I would be a survivor, free. Fireworks continued to crackle in the Seattle night sky, bright bursts of light exploding in the distance. But in the Larsons' backyard, the air was thick with a tense, suffocating silence. Ryan and Chloe's snickers and taunts had died down when Chloe, with a contemptuous smile, tilted her head and said, stabbing me in the chest, "Emma is no longer part of this family." At that moment, I took a deep breath. All eyes were on me, waiting for a weak response, a pleading look, a plea, a tear. But they were wrong. I was no longer the Emma of those years of being led into darkness. The hurt had turned to steel, and the fear had been forged into courage. I walked slowly, step by step, with a face as cold as stone and a gaze as sharp as steel, towards the banquet table where empty wine glasses and leftovers were scattered. I placed my green box in the middle of the table, in front of Eleanor, Ryan, and Chloe. The dry click sound of the box hitting the wooden table echoed in the quiet space like the opening bell of a ruthless trial. "Yes," I said, my voice firm and clear, a stark contrast to the chaos that had swirled in my head a few minutes ago. I stopped paying, and here's why. I opened the lid of the box. Without a trace of trepidation, I took out each piece of evidence, placing it on the table slowly and precisely, like a master craftsman arranging each piece of a final project. First came the stack of luxury shopping receipts and the statements from my mother's secret bank account. I handed them to Eleanor so she could see each number, each item. "You said you needed the money to pay the bills, to keep this house from falling apart," I said, my eyes piercing her like a knife. "But here's the evidence that you used that money to buy designer clothes, get hundreds of dollars in spa treatments, and then to save it in a separate account." "You lied to me, Eleanor." I deliberately said her name instead of mother, as a final statement of termination. Eleanor turned pale. Her eyes widened. Her lips moved as if to protest, but no words came out. Tom sat beside her, staring at the papers, his expression a mixture of confusion and shock. I pulled out the photos of Ryan bragging about his shiny sports car, along with receipts from the casinos he frequented. I placed them in front of Ryan. He took a step back, his eyes wide with panic. "Ryan," I said, still calm, "you said you needed money for technology. This? This is your breakthrough technology? Buying cars, gambling, and throwing money away? You lied to me and used me cruelly." Ryan, always arrogant and talkative, was now silent. He opened his mouth as if to defend himself, but his throat seemed choked by the naked truth. Finally, I pulled out the receipts for the luxury yoga retreats, the expensive meditation retreats, and the plane tickets to Hawaii and Europe. "And you, Chloe," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You said you needed money for car repairs and living expenses. Is this how you live? Traveling, enjoying yourself, living lavishly at the expense of others? You've used my kindness like an unlimited credit card." Chloe burst into tears immediately, but I could see clearly. They weren't tears of repentance. They were tears of someone who had been exposed, humiliated in front of a crowd. When everything was laid out, I stood up straight, watching each face turn pale with shame and anger. "In total," I announced, my voice ringing like a church bell, drawing the attention of even those standing far away. "Over the past 5 years, I have spent $110,000 on this so-called family. That money could have been a down payment on my first home or a hedge fund for the future. But I have been lied to, drained dry, and called a free bank." I paused, letting the silence fall like a slap. Then I took 3 thick envelopes from the green box. "Now," I said, my voice no longer cold, but filled with undeniable authority, "you have 2 choices." And I handed the first envelope, a signed legal agreement, to Eleanor. "Option 1. Sign here. You will repay the entire amount according to a legally approved plan, with interest. At the same time, you will all attend supervised family therapy to, if possible, repair this relationship through honesty and mutual respect." The second envelope I handed to Ryan and Chloe. Inside were copies of all the evidence, along with a detailed legal warning. "Option 2. Refuse. Then I will take everything to court. Every receipt, every photo, every lie. It will be made public. And I promise it will not only affect your bank accounts, but it will bury your reputation forever." I tilted my head slightly, pointing to the recording phone under the table. A final warning. The room fell silent. Even the fireworks outside seemed to have stopped. I was back in control. My battle, finally, had officially begun. The air in the garden was thick and stifling, as if every particle of air was heavy, pulling down on my chest. The fireworks were still booming outside, but now they were just distant, meaningless noises, lost in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The first to react was Eleanor's mother. Her face changed rapidly, from pale to red, then white as a sheet. Her eyes were fixed on the papers on the table, wide with horror. "Emma, I don't know anything." Her voice broke, trembling, far from her usual sharp tone. But as tears rolled down her cheeks, I realized immediately. They were not tears of remorse or regret, but of shame at being exposed and fear of punishment. She reached out to me, her voice breaking. I just wanted to live a little more comfortably. I've sacrificed my whole life." Ryan exploded like a lit fuse. He stood up, his chair falling behind him, his face red with anger. "You're crazy, Emma. How dare you do this to your own family? Who do you think you are to lecture me? What right do you have?" He lunged forward, trying to snatch the box and documents from my hands, but I held him tight. He glared at me, his eyes blazing with anger. "You coward! You can't face me, so you resort to this dirty trick?" Chloe was no less dramatic. After a few seconds of stunned silence, she screamed hysterically, "You're horrible! How could you humiliate us in front of everyone? You're destroying our family!" She cried and struggled, but her tears were too perfect to be real. To me, it was just another act in a series of fake scripts that I had memorized. But the person who caught my attention the most was Tom. The man who had always been quiet and out of the picture now trembled as he looked at his wife. His eyes reflected hurt and utter shock. "Eleanor, is this true? When did you start doing this?" His voice was no longer languid but heavy with disappointment. Clearly, he was just another victim of my mother's game. Amidst the chaos, I remained coldly calm. No tears, no excuses. I had been ready for this moment. I looked at each of them, my eyes sharp, my voice steady, clear above the cacophony. "This is not a game, nor is it cowardice," I said, my voice like a knife cutting through the air. "This is the truth you do not want to face. And I gave you the chance to speak in private, but you chose mockery and contempt." I didn't argue. I didn't back down. I emphasized what I had said. Two choices. Either sign the reimbursement agreement and accept treatment, or go to court with me. The evidence is in, and I'm ready to reveal it all. I placed 3 envelopes on the table, each as heavy as a verdict. That's all I have to say. The rest is up to you. I turned away, not looking back, not waiting for a response. Behind me, the screams, the crashes, the sobs echoed like a distorted symphony of a family falling apart, but I didn't stop. I opened the gate, stepped through it, leaving behind a world I had tried to hold on to at all costs. On that familiar path, under the last rays of light from the fireworks sky, I felt something I had lost for years. Freedom. A strange relief crept into every cell, as if the burden that had been weighing me down for 8 years had suddenly evaporated. I had spoken the truth. I had stood up for myself. And for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. But amidst all that, there was something else that was tearing at my heart. A dull loss that no words could soothe. I had traded my freedom to regain myself, but at the same time, I had lost the only thing that had ever held me together. My family. I wasn't sure I could mend those broken pieces. In that moment, amidst the dazzling light of the fireworks and the cold night, I was the loneliest woman, but also the freest. 7 months after that fateful 4th of July, my life had taken a completely different turn. I was no longer living in the old, gloomy, haunted apartment. Now I lived in Bellevue, a peaceful little town near Seattle, in a small but light-filled studio. I had decorated every detail myself in a minimalist style, with soft colors and lush greenery. The apartment had become my first private space in life. A world without any burdens, no responsibilities weighing on my shoulders other than my own. The apartment symbolized the freedom I had won through both pain and courage. I sold my old car and bought a smaller, more efficient electric car. Things began to feel lighter. I no longer had to work so hard or count every penny. Instead, I learned to live for myself. I joined a local running club, rediscovered the joy of movement, and made new friends. People who knew nothing of my troubled past. My morning runs along the lake not only gave me fresh air, but also helped me feel like I was healing, little by little. And then I met Ethan. He was a history teacher at a nearby high school, with curly brown hair, warm eyes, and a gentle smile. We met by chance at a volunteer park cleanup. Ethan didn't know anything about my past, and I didn't feel the need to tell him. He was simply a kind man, patiently listening to me talk about my work, the books I was reading, or the little dreams I had buried. He never asked me about money or family. With Ethan, I felt safe, treated as I was, not as a wallet or a means to be used. He was like a breath of fresh air, bringing new hope into my seemingly desolate life. While my life was slowly stabilizing, on the other side, My family was forced to change, albeit slowly and reluctantly. The first to suffer the most obvious consequences was my mother, Eleanor. Tom announced that he and Eleanor had separated that night. He said he could no longer live with a woman who was full of secrets and lies. The blow hit my mother hard. Without Tom to lean on, even though he wasn't much help, and without me to extort money from, she was forced to make changes. At first, she resisted fiercely, but under pressure from her lawyer and the threat of being dragged into court, she relented. She began cutting back on her spending, selling off the luxury items she had bought with my money. She even got a part-time job at a local department store. Despite her constant complaining, she was at least learning to be independent. She also reluctantly attended individual therapy sessions to address her control and dependency issues, a small but significant step forward. Ryan was forced to cave in after a series of aggressive legal moves by my attorney. Though he was still angry and blamed me, he had no choice but to cooperate. Eventually, Ryan took a part-time job at a local electronics store. It wasn't the million-dollar project he'd bragged about, but it was at least a steady income. Under the legal agreement, he was required to pay me back in small amounts. The amounts weren't large, but they were regular. A monthly reminder that I had regained the control he'd once taken away. Chloe, on the other hand, was the most resistant. She refused to go to therapy, stubbornly blaming me for ruining our family. She posted ambiguous statuses on social media, playing the pathetic victim. But when her mother and Ryan's financial resources dried up, Chloe had no choice but to work. She found a full-time job at a clothing store. While she was still often resentful and victimized, she was at least beginning to stand on her own 2 feet. The Larsons eventually signed a legal settlement. I received small monthly payments from them, a slow, steady sliver of justice that I thought would never come. My relationship with them remains distant and fractured, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that they faced the truth and took responsibility for what they did. And I walked out of that bottomless pit with the freedom and dignity I long deserved. 7 months into my independent life and watching my family slowly and reluctantly change, I felt strong enough to try something new, a family dinner. This wasn't a meeting for forgiveness, nor was it intended to make any immediate amends. It was simply an experiment, a test of whether I could maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. I had a careful conversation with Dr. Reed, my trusted therapist. She advised me to find a neutral place and set clear rules for myself. "Emma," she said, her voice steady, "the most important thing is to protect yourself. Don't let your emotions guide you. Always remember why you're doing all this." Following that advice, I invited Eleanor, Ryan, and Chloe to a casual restaurant in downtown Seattle, a place I had never taken them before. I deliberately didn't invite Tom since he was still separated from my mother, and I didn't want to add any complications to an already sensitive evening. Before they arrived, I met privately with the restaurant manager to ask that we split the bill. I also set myself 3 unbreakable rules: no money discussions, everyone paid for their own food, and if there were any complaints or manipulations, I would leave immediately without hesitation. When they showed up, the atmosphere was awkward at first. Eleanor looked more haggard than I remembered, and Chloe kept her face cold and defensive. Ryan tried to be friendly, but the tension was clear in his eyes. We ordered, and I managed to make conversation about the weather, work, and the mundane things of everyday life. Innocent enough topics to fill the air without touching on the past. Ryan was the first to break the ice. As the appetizers were being served, he suddenly spoke up. "Oh, Emma, I just heard about a great investment opportunity. A hot tech project that has a high chance of exploding. Want to hear it?" "I think this is different." His eyes were hopeful, as if everything had been forgotten. I just smiled softly and shook my head firmly. "I'm not talking about finances anymore, Ryan. I'm focusing on my current job." Then I quickly asked Chloe about her job. Ryan looked disappointed but kept his mouth shut. Chloe quickly played the victim. "Emma, the salary at the store is terrible. The cost of living here is so high I can't even buy anything for myself." She spoke in a sad voice, expecting pity. I looked straight into her eyes, my smile still there, but my gaze unwavering. "Yeah, living alone is something everyone has to deal with, right?" I replied as if I was talking to a stranger. Life is like that. Everyone has to fend for themselves. Chloe was stunned, then silent. When the main course was served, Eleanor's mother, ever the most skillful manipulator, finally spoke. She gently placed her hand on mine, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emma, honey," she said, her voice trembling. "Our house is in serious disrepair. The roof is leaking, and I really need some money to fix it. Can you help me?" "Just a little." I gently pulled my hand away from hers, looking straight into her eyes. Not angry, just determined. "Mom, we have a legal agreement. You and everyone else are paying me back on schedule. I can't give you any more money. I need to protect my life." Mom bowed her head and said nothing more. She sighed softly. For the rest of the meal, no one dared to mention money again. The conversation revolved around dull topics, a few movies, a bit of news, a few social comments, like strangers trying to be polite. When dinner was over, the manager brought out the check. As I had requested, 3 separate bills were placed on the table. All 3 of us looked surprised, but no one dared to ask any questions. They quietly took out their wallets and each paid his or her share. No complaints, no blame. Walking out of the restaurant, I felt a quiet victory. I had held my ground. The evening had not brought warmth or connection, but it had been a milestone, a clear step forward. I had proven that I was no longer their bottomless purse. Our relationship might still be rocky, but at least it was now based on something else. Respect, however grudging, and boundaries, as clear as a flashlight in the dark. One sunny afternoon, I sat quietly in my small apartment in Bellevue, where the trees outside the window swayed in the wind, drawing soft light on the wall. On the table was a cup of hot tea and a half-read book lying face down as if resting. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let my mind drift with the memory, slowly and emotionally. How long has it been since everything changed forever? 7 months. 7 months since I had the courage to stand up, face the truth, put aside the role of silent hero that I had embraced for so many years, and choose to live my own life. Free, clear, and no longer bound by the expectations of others. I think about that journey. From a 15-year-old girl who had to shoulder the financial burden of a broken family, to a 32-year-old woman who was taken advantage of without hesitation, and then, finally, to a strong, independent Emma Larson who dared to speak up, set boundaries, and take back control of her life. I used to believe that true love was about selfless sacrifice, about giving without expecting anything in return. I thought it was my duty to be a walking ATM, an unconditional source of support for my family. That belief cost me not only my fortune, but also my youth, my buried dreams, and my inner peace. The moment I heard them call me free bank, not in anger, but with contempt, was when my heart broke. But strangely enough, it was also the moment I began to be reborn. It was that betrayal that became the bitter medicine that opened my eyes, pulling me out of the darkness of resignation. I now understand that love is not about self-sacrifice, but about understanding and healthy boundaries. Family should not be a shackle that binds people to feelings of guilt, but a relationship built on trust, fairness, and respect. And most of all, I have learned that putting myself first is not selfishness. It is a basic human right. I have the right to be happy, to live my own life, and to say no when necessary, not to hurt others, but to protect myself. The old blue box, where I had kept the evidence of my pain, the receipts, letters, and texts that proved my betrayal, had been replaced by a new box, also blue, but with a different meaning. Inside was a diary I wrote in every day, a record of my thoughts, feelings, and lessons from my healing journey. There were photos of my new life, morning runs with friends, trips to coastal towns, and sweet moments with Ethan. The box was a symbol of hope, of a new me, more peaceful, stronger, and no longer a victim. My relationship with my biological family is still rocky. My mother, Eleanor, is still in therapy, and she's starting to open up a little, though the change is slow. Ryan has a steady job, and while he still slips up occasionally, he's at least making his payments on time. Chloe is the most resistant, but the financial pressures are forcing her to grow up. All 3 of us are still abiding by the legal agreement, paying back every penny I stole. a positive sign that they're learning to respect the boundaries I've set. I know this healing journey will be a long one. I have no illusions that I can change them completely, but I don't need that anymore. I no longer dream of a perfect family. Instead, I am focusing on building a fulfilling life based on what I can control myself. I have found my true family in my sincere friends, in my loving and secure relationship with Ethan. I have found inner peace, a freedom from conditions. I dared to look at the wound, to step out of the darkness and reclaim my voice. I learned that sometimes, to grow, one must have the courage to let go of the past. Not because it is not important, but because it is no longer worth holding on to. I embrace the future with a grateful heart and a strong spirit. I am ready to create a family on my own terms, where love does not mean sacrifice, where boundaries are clear, and where I will never lose myself again, regardless of whether my biological family changes or not. Thank you for listening to my story.